I'm Eitan Weinstein.
And I'm Naor Menninger. And you're listening to Two Nice Jewish Boys.
This podcast is made in collaboration with the Jewish Journal.
Hey guys, before we get to the episode today, we have a great partnership with Israel Story. If you haven't heard about Israel Story, it's a podcast that brings you long-form storytelling from in and around Israel. It tells extraordinary true stories about regular people living in Israel, the kind you won't see on the news or read about online. The show presents quirky, unpredictable, interesting, and moving stories about a place we think we know a lot about, but really don't. So, for example, they just kicked off season 4 with an episode called The Wall, which has this amazing story about a Jewish Arab baby born at the Western Wall in the middle of the Six-Day War. It's incredible. So, guys, check it out. Israel Story. Ira Glass himself called it This American Life of Israel. You can subscribe to Israel Story today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, at israelstory.org, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Israel has certainly earned the nickname Startup Nation. We have the largest number of startups per capita in the entire world. The population of this small country recently passed 9 million. So that's about a startup for every 1,500 people. The stories abound of huge exits, like Mobileye to Intel for $15 billion, Mellanox sold to Nvidia for about $7 billion earlier this year, and the list goes on and on and on. But what makes Israel the startup hub that it is? What does the VC startup courtship look like here in Israel? And with so many startups, what happens to all the ones that fail? Max Marine is a CFA at Lool Ventures, an Israeli VC that has invested in several successful Israeli startups, including Zooz, which sold to PayU for $80 million. So I'm super thrilled to be joined by Max today on the podcast to talk about Startup Nation. Thank you so much, man, for joining us. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
So why do you think it is that that Israel is like, I mean, you have like a front row seat to this stuff, right? You see these guys every day coming and begging for money. But why do you think it is that like we have so many startups and so many people that are entrepreneurial?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say anything too original because, most of my perspective on this came from that book, Startup Nation, that I read about 10 years ago on my way to Israel for the first time.
Confession, I never read it.
So I'll give
it'll
you,
sound
I'll give
super
you the cliff,
original
I'll
to
give
me.
you the Cliff's Notes. It's a mixture of things. Obviously, you have this country of immigrants and, everyone's trying to sort of prove themselves as, a successful person. Many really successful businesses in America were built by immigrants. So to have a country full of them, many first generation, you just sort of have this like fearlessness, nothing to lose, no legacy behind you. I think, obviously the book points a lot to the Army and the experience that you get in the Army of taking responsibility at a young age and managing sometimes tens or maybe even hundreds of people at a very young age. So it just gives the DNA of entrepreneurship to lots of people, as well as the threats that Israel faces on a daily basis, from the air, from the land, from the sea. They're sort of forced to create a lot of really innovative solutions with very few resources to sort of sustain.
Think outside the box.
Definitely have to think outside the box, but just to sustain like some sense of safety and security. I mean, it's no surprise that cybersecurity in Israel is world class and protects trillions of dollars in value all over the world. Computers, mobile phones, everything's being protected by Israeli cyber on some layer. And they have to do it first for themselves, but then when they leave the Army, they realize, wait, I can make a lot of money like just selling this to the
But is it
the
like
world.
Technologies that they take from I mean, I don't know if you know this, but like, is it technologies that they take from the military, or is it?
I mean, like, when you build a system to scrape web data, like to protect, the country, then you understand big data and system architecture and the internet's infrastructure. So when you come out, you can apply that knowledge to a different problem or a different use case. You're not necessarily protecting your, national security, but maybe you're finding some correlation between, I don't know, consumer data and buying patterns, and you create some sort of retail
What I'm
company.
saying is there like any issue with the IP,
IP,
that like
yeah.
people are, is there, have you ever encountered a story where people have been like with the military has kind of cracked down on, I don't know, someone taking
Most
IP?
IP conflicts we have come from actually universities. So they've developed something at like the Weitzman or Technion or TAU or BGU, and now they're trying to bring it out. And, the universities want everything, and the entrepreneurs want everything. And then in Israel, it's just, it's a fight to the death.
I remember Naor and I actually studied film together at Tel Aviv University, and basically there's a like part of the terms of agreement of learning at the university is that everything you make in the university is owned by
it's university property.
Yeah, it's like their IP.
Yeah.
So, I mean, none of us made it big, so luckily in the university. So yeah. Okay, so what's this like VC startup relationship like? I mean, is it like dating? I mean, I feel like it would be kind of this courtship where startups are trying to like, vie for VC's attention. But I heard recently, I read that kind of the tables have turned here in Israel, and that like really the VCs are trying to get the attention of the startups. Yeah.
So there's a Pareto in VC, which is that, 80% of the companies are less attractive, 20% are very attractive. And so basically all of the VCs want to get in front of that 20%. It actually gets even more significant once you go into that 20%. Of that 20%, only 20% are really, really high quality, which gets you to like 4% of the total, addressable entrepreneurship market.
Math.
Yeah, exactly. Multiplication, division.
God damn.
And so basically, I like to say that VCs are in the business of selling money. Most people think it's the opposite way around, where, all these amazing entrepreneurs are knocking at your doorstep every day and you just get to choose which one, you partner with. But really VCs want to work with a very small group of entrepreneurs the most, and those entrepreneurs really have the selection ability. So to get into the best deals, you have to really compete.
But the thing is, like, at the early stages, you have no idea who that 4% is. You know what I mean? You don't know who's going to be that 4% that turn into Mobileye.
Well, let me give you an example. So, let's use Eyal Waldman, who just sold Mellanox to Nvidia, okay, for $7 billion. Let's say Eyal, after he earns his earnout and takes some time to retire, comes up with a new business idea. Okay. Is he someone you would want to invest in, or someone you have really no clue if he's going to be successful or not?
I don't know. It depends. Maybe you think lightning doesn't strike twice in the same place.
Right. So the research shows that if you've sold a business successfully once, the chances of you doing it again are actually much higher. A lot of times, the first exit is just enough to give that entrepreneur sort of the financial stability that they never really need to work again. But if they choose to work again, this time they're doing it not to get rich. They're doing it out of some sort of like passion, or just they don't want to sell early anymore because they have no financial incentive to sell early. They have more of an incentive to take it all the way. So second time and third time entrepreneurs are much more likely to build like these colossal, massive companies than the first time entrepreneur, which, he or she sees $1 million on the table that they can take home. And maybe it's not a great outcome for the VC, but it's a great outcome for the founder. So aligning incentives between the VC and the first-time founder can be difficult sometimes because, if I know I can sell at 50 million and I now have 5 million in the bank, the VC, they're going to get maybe 2, 3, 4x, but VCs really want to see 10, 20, 30x on their money because of the way the economics of the industry work. So
they're not so happy with these big exits.
No, they're very happy with huge exits.
Okay.
They're disappointed when maybe just to clarify. So 50 million would be considered like a small exit, and then the hundreds of millions would be medium sized, and then anything over $1 billion would be considered like a big exit.
So they're happy with those. That's what they want to get to.
That's what they're shooting for.
They don't. I mean, there's no VC that looks for a startup that just continually grows and kind of consistently grows and like maintains that growth and grows into a company. I don't know, that never sells. Is there any VC that's looking for that, or are they always looking for this payout?
Yeah. So I mean, basically, just in terms of the way the industry works, so you have private companies and public companies. Public companies are like Google or Apple or Facebook or whatever. And the difference between Google, Apple, and Facebook, and let's say Lemonade, right, which is a company we all have heard about, is that you can't buy and sell Lemonade shares on an exchange. The only way you can do it is through a private market. Mm-hmm. Okay? So we're happy for Lemonade, if I'm an investor, we're happy for them to go public because then we can sell our shares in the secondary market to other investors. But, if they just grow continuously and they never go public, then we never really are able to sell our shares and return capital to the people who gave us money in the first place.
So it's either exit and
right.
be bought out by a huge company
right.
for a large sum of money, or do an IPO and sell shares to the public.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you don't want to stay private and grow indefinitely because then there's no real exit event. There's no return that you can actually pay out to your shareholders.
But I feel like in Israel, it feels like the main kind of track. Like it feels like everybody's shooting for this exit. Like it doesn't feel like anybody's trying to like. I mean, I don't know. I don't have enough knowledge about the industry, like the area here. But like, it feels like everybody's aiming for this, the ICQ like story and sell and make tons of money and kind of now with Mobileye and Mellanox and all these companies that are selling. It feels like everybody's shooting for that and not really for like sustained growth and an IPO and yada yada yada. Is that accurate or is that not really true?
It's not quite accurate. So Mobileye actually was a public company. They went public. And believe it or not, even public companies can still get acquired for significant premiums. Like Microsoft bought LinkedIn. LinkedIn was already public, but they got acquired for like $26 billion, which was a high premium over what they were trading at. Mobileye also, I think, was trading at $10 billion or something like this. And then Intel came in and put down a $15 billion offer. And Mellanox also went public, repaid many of the early investors high multiples, and then Nvidia came in and snatched them from the public market and wrapped them into their own company. So, to the extent that Israeli companies are focused on getting acquired before they go public, I think that's been sort of the criticism. Israelis sell early, yada, yada, yada. They're not willing to build like a global company. I think that's changed. I mean, Fiverr just went public. Lemonade, I think, will eventually go public. You have
Wix is still around.
Wix.me is public. WalkMe is going to go public. And I think there's, at least 20 companies right now that are Israeli founded worth over $1 billion. Some of them are still private. Some of them are not. But it's clear that, Israel's sort of shaking its reputation as, purely a quick exit type country.
So how much is like, you're looking at this from the VC side. Mm-hmm. So I guess let's start by like, what do you guys look for? Mm-hmm. What's the best way that a company can come and pitch an idea to you guys?
Mm-hmm. So at the seed stage, it's a little bit difficult to, we just don't have much data. When you're an A-round investor, you'll have probably 18 months of data on the team's ability to execute and what assets they've created and how many customers. And
so wait, can you
revenues.
Break that down for us? Like what's an A round, what's a B round, and all that?
Yeah, sure. So basically, the chronology of a startup's life begins with a couple of founders with an idea, trying to figure out like, is there an actual need for me to build this product? It could be just software. It could be hardware and software.
Square donuts.
It could be basically
could be anything.
We focus exactly circular donuts, out of style. Square donuts starting to become a lot more popular.
Trendy.
I've seen some cube donuts, but they're hard to bite.
I have lots of great
cream
ideas.
just squirts right. It's rough. And basically, we focus at Lool on technology-enabled startups, but you could also make the claim that, like, someone who created this, right, is also a startup in a way, right? I mean, they started their own business. They're now selling, this card game to consumers. It is a startup in a way.
I have to plug them now, guys.
Please do it.
The Chosen One game, chosenonegame.com. It's a card game. Check it out. They're awesome. Plus, you support the podcast. All right,
Yeah,
keep
exactly. I wasn't paid to say that. It was just natural.
that was perfect,
That was
man.
as
We
good
should
as it
hire you.
gets, Yeah.
Okay, so
Anyway, so basically
you could claim that they're a startup, but most of the startups here in Israel are tech.
most of the startups are building some sort of
focused.
software related product. At least that's what we focus on, and many of the VCs here focus on.
So you got a couple of founders. They have an idea. They get together in a garage and they start this company.
Classic.
Yeah.
And then they need funding. Why do they need funding? Well, they want to hire people, right? To build value, you actually need talented people who are capable of creating a product from nothing, from just an idea. So the first, source of funding is usually family and friends. They'll throw in, a couple tens or $100,000 to the founders just to get them off the ground, so they can hire maybe the designer to prototype what it will look like when it goes to production, or they'll approach an angel who might be able to put 100K or 200K, and there's also pre-seed funds that will put like 250K, and so that's sort of like the earliest sort of way to get started in terms of financing.
Like an unofficial round.
Yeah, it's unofficial. I would say that's accurate. But that's only really to get things started. Now, in some cases, you might be able to get a grant from the government, or you might be able to go to Horizon 2020 in the UN, and you're doing something great for the planet, so they'll give you $2 million. There's all these different funding sources at the early stage. There's accelerators, there's incubators, there's all these very early stage funding sources. But eventually, to really really jumpstart your growth, either you need your customers to be putting a lot of money right back into the business, so you can hire new people and you're already profitable, which is very rare. Probably 0.01% of companies are able to, software companies are able to finance themselves from customers that early on, because it just takes resources to actually create a functional software product, even though that those resources have gone down over time. So then you come to us, or you come to other seed investors, and you say, look, I need $1.5 million, $2.5 million, sometimes $3.5 million. Lemonade raised $13 million in their first financing because of the team, right? And so this brings us back to, your initial question, what are you looking for when you first evaluate a startup? And basically, ideas are, there's millions of great ideas out there.
Dime a dozen, yeah.
But execution, exactly. Time a dozen. the execution is obviously the more challenging part, right? Because, I want to wake up every morning and run. It's a great idea. And then you look at the data, how many times did I do that? It's much harder to actually put into practice things than it is to say you want to. So we evaluate the track record of the team. Did they serve in an elite unit? Did they work at, a corporation that's known for, investing in their employees to create, knowledge and best practices? Did they build and sell a different startup? Did they have leadership qualities? Did they have determination? All these, softer traits we're also trying to understand, because ultimately it's funny, because in VC you just sometimes within, weeks you give people, a commitment for money, and then you're marrying them for potentially 10 years. And it's sort of psycho to think about, in the dating market, if after a couple weeks of dating someone in the non-religious communities, you would be willing to sign up for 10 or more years with this person you barely know. And that's basically what we do. I mean, sometimes, evaluation process could take months, but normally it takes, a month or less before we commit. And so we do a lot of work in that one period, basically to understand who the people are. Do they have good chemistry? Do they have good morals? We do reference checks. We do all this work on the team itself to really understand the team. That's one thing. But then obviously you have the market. What problem are they trying to solve? Is it a big problem? Is it an urgent problem? How many other, companies are solving this problem? Is it, completely flooded with other companies trying to solve it? Is it something unique? So a lot of diligence around the market. Then obviously in Israel, we're known for our innovation and technology. Are they doing something differently than all these other companies? Or are they doing something defensible that no one else, has thought of? They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the domain expertise. They didn't come from that specific unit that created that specific, technology that now, is like there's 10 people in the world who know about this, and it's quantum computing and it's going to change. There's all these parameters or risk factors that we have to look at. As a seed fund, this gets actually back to your other question. We can only take the company to the A round. The A round is essentially just a name for the next round. So you have the seed and then the A. And basically the A round investors are a little bit more discriminatory. As a seed fund, you don't have that much data. So a lot of times you bet on the team and the idea and the size of the market. Once you get to the A round, it's like, show us that you've actually been able to sell to customers, that the customers like your product, that they're using it. Or if it's, consumer facing, that the users like it, that they're reviewing it, that they're using it. What's the engagement look like? What's the retention look like? You have all this data now in the business and you can't fake it. At the seed round, you can kind of fake it because, if you're really good at storytelling, you're really good at being a visionary, seed round investors only have such a window that, if they miss it, then suddenly, it's going to become too expensive. We can talk about pricing, but it's kind of...
So at A round, you're already expected to have a product.
Yeah, in most cases, you're expected to have a product. There's some exceptions where it's like super deep technology that like you need dozens of engineers to work on it for like 3 years. But once it's like created, there will be nothing else like it in the world. And so an A round investor might put in, like, quantum computing is a great example because it's an area where people are actually trying to build like a completely new way of computing information.
It sounds like comic book stuff.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert and I'm not going to pretend to be, but basically there are certain mathematical problems that would take like this computer like hundreds of years to simulate to get to an answer. And simply put, quantum computers can do it in like hours, which means certain things about like modeling biology or modeling, certain math problems, climate, weather, exactly, cannot today be modeled accurately by classical computers, but with quantum computing they can be. And most of these computers need to be like in super, super low temperatures, underground, like IBM's working on it, Google's working on it, all these different companies are working on it. And so, that takes, a lot of resources. So even after the seed round, they may raise an A round or a B round, or even sometimes a C round with no actual customers yet, just because the resources it takes to create this new product. Yeah.
What I'm wondering is I don't understand how like we'll continue talking a bit about like what B round is afterwards and what are the next stages after that. Sure. But what I don't understand is, okay, you're talking about quantum computing, for example. I always imagine like these startups to be like, Mobileye is, I guess, kind of a good example, but like I imagine them to be this simple idea that's pretty simple to implement because, that's something that you can kind of compete against these like huge technological giants like Google and Microsoft and whatever, right? Okay. IBM. But like, how do you come into the game saying I'm gonna be the game changer in quantum computing? Like when you have these like enormous corporations putting everything they have into like figuring out how to do what you were just describing, and then you come and say, okay, look, it's me and these 3 guys, and we know how to do this. Like, is that actually what's happening? Like, or is it like they're solving a certain problem of quantum computing and for that they get funding?
Yeah, I think that last part is probably a little bit more accurate. Basically, when you have a new domain emerge, like AI, right? That's been the buzz of like the last 3 years. Everyone's talking about AI. Sure, Google and Facebook and Amazon and whoever, they're building, amazing AI teams that are solving incredibly complex problems. But it's such a massive space with so many different applications of AI and so many different problems that, are only emerging as the industry matures. For example, like the way that you build AI applications requires that you get lots of data and that you clean the data and that you train the data. So there's startups that specialize in cleaning the data. And Facebook, may have a great, AI cleaning data team, but they're using it for Facebook. What about all the other Fortune 500 companies, right? They need a solution for their data science teams, right? So even if Google and whoever is focused on quantum computing, you don't know if they're going to use it internally, use it externally. Maybe they'll miss, some part of the full quantum computing stack that, this team at the Weizmann Institute, for example, has just really focused on in their research that no one at Google has yet identified this, opportunity or this, whatever break in the model once you get to a certain scale. Or maybe they've created a quantum computer that works 100 times better because Google hasn't, gotten there in terms of research.
So what I'm wondering is is that where the entrepreneurial kind of industry is heading? Is it just these very niche, very technical, highly skilled kind of problems that need solving? And if you can find a solution to one of those, or how many of the startups are these just kind of these these ingenious ideas? They're oh, okay, like Airbnb, you know what I mean? How many of those are providing those solutions versus okay, solving an aspect of deep learning, or I don't know.
Right. It's a good question. I don't know that I can,
are there good examples of big startups that are just coming up with these simple, because I want hope. I'm not going to solve quantum computing, but maybe I'll come up with so
right.
I'm looking for something, for some hope.
Right. So, I mean, most non-technical entrepreneurs are looking for problems that they deal with every day.
Yeah.
So, you might have a personal problem that you want to solve. Maybe the way that podcasts are marketed today sucks, and it's very hard to get your podcast out there online. So you come up with a podcast influencer platform that, helps you. I mean, it looks like you're already doing that with the Israel story, but maybe you come up with some problem that you were facing as an entrepreneur, as a podcast entrepreneur. So there's plenty of those stories where it comes from a personal problem. Obviously, someone working on quantum computing wasn't experiencing a personal problem in their life, but maybe they dedicated their life's research to it, so it also comes from a personal problem. But basically, I differentiate between enabling technologies, making things more efficient, versus disruptive technologies, which actually change the rules of efficiency. So let me give you an example from our portfolio. Okay. There's a big problem today with bees. It was actually declared the most important living being on Earth last year by the Royal Society of London. We depend on bees for 30% of our food. They pollinate. Basically, they're the sexual organs of nature. They pollinate 30% of the foods we eat. Nuts, seeds, avocados, tomatoes, fruits, vegetables, basically all the healthy stuff bees are responsible for, and they're dying. They're getting crushed. They're sometimes 30 to 40%. This past winter in the U.S. was the worst colony collapse we've ever seen in history. And there's lots of different, theories about why they're dying, but ultimately one that many bee scientists agree on is this lethal parasite called the Verona mites. And the Verona mite evolved in Indonesia and then was brought to the U.S. by accident with honeybees, because honeybees are not an indigenous species to the U.S., but they actually are the only species that can pollinate almonds. So 85% of the world's almonds today are grown in California. They ship in 1.5 million hives every year for a 3-week period just so we can have our almonds. It's a crazy situation.
Wow, that's amazing.
And they literally ship bees, live bees on trucks, 18-wheelers, 1.5 million. So imagine the transportation, the logistics, the insurance, the catastrophes that could happen from having all these bees on trucks. And basically these bees are just subjected to this lethal parasite and they're dying off. So what can we do?
So they're brought to California, and then in California, they end up dying.
They die on the way. They die in their apiaries. They're dying all over the place because we haven't really found a way to deal with this parasite. Now, you can start monitoring the hives. You can put sensors on the hives and start listening and hearing when bees are starting to die and alert the beekeeper owner. And you say, go to the hive and, spray pesticide and solve the problem. It turns out there's actually a labor shortage. There's not enough beekeepers. Now, you know what beekeepers look like. Like they're wearing this huge thing. They're getting up at 5 a.m. They're driving all day and all night. It's like a really tough job. There's not many out there. So even if you know that all of your hives are infected, you don't have enough beekeepers, you don't have enough manual labor to actually address the hives. And by the time the beekeepers get there, sometimes half the apiary is done.
It's that quick?
Yeah, I mean, like basically these bees are dying like sometimes in hours, if not less. So basically we invested in a robotic beehive. Okay. And if you think about a lot of the beekeeping tasks, a lot of them can be automated by robotics and AI. And so they've recreated the hive. Now, why am I saying this? So you could sell, a technology to the beekeepers. They can, drive faster and do more with the same tools, and you're making them much more efficient as beekeepers. But you're not really changing the rules of the game. When you create a new hive, it automates the beekeeper completely. Think about autonomous driving, right? It's not really an enabling technology. It's a disruptive technology. It actually changes all of the economics of Uber and Lyft and taxis and even just like transportation in general. So to make a long story short, I would separate the different technologies being developed in Israel as, does it make something more efficient or does it change the business model of the industry?
Wait, can you tell us the name of the bee company?
Beewise.
Beewise?
Yeah.
Wow. So would you say most of the companies in Israel are disruptive or are enabling, or there's not a clear trend?
Right. So, I mean, I can't say that I've done the research in terms of categorizing. I can say, in our portfolio, I'd say probably like 70% are enablement and 30% are disruptive, something like that.
Disrupting is like naturally more difficult.
It's more difficult, and I think it's more difficult for Israelis, even though they are very innovative in their thinking. But usually the disruption is coming to the U.S. market, right? And I think it's a little bit more challenging to just like completely revolutionize a foreign market versus like Silicon Valley. I mean, you hear this word disruption just, every single time you're there. Like, I think the Silicon Valley ethos historically has been, how do we disrupt? And the ethos in Israel has been, how do we make it more efficient? And now maybe we're seeing a little bit of like cross-pollination, not to use a pun, but between the two ecosystems. And I think Israelis are becoming a little bit more disruptive.
Nice. Can you tell us a bit more about like other companies that you guys are invested in? Like
No.
No?
Yeah, I can, of course. So yeah, Beewise is pretty interesting. We invested in a company called No Traffic.
Okay.
Basically, they've developed a sensor system for intersections. I don't know if you know the stats, but just above 1% of the intersections in the United States are connected to the internet, which means that all the other 99% are just going on like these automated programs that get pre-planned by traffic engineers and are not responsive to real-time, problems.
Yeah.
So basically they have a plan for the traffic hour and a plan for the non-traffic hour, and that's as sophisticated as it gets. And the tracking of cars is based on these like really expensive old school wires that are built underneath the road. And so what No Traffic basically said is, look, we have a system that connects your infrastructure to the internet. It actually can talk to cars as they're coming and warn them, if there's oncoming traffic from the other direction that's going to run a red light. It can alert you to pedestrians. It's basically the infrastructure for autonomous vehicles. They're a big part of that. And basically when you put cameras on the intersections, you connect it to the internet, you allow the city to just essentially enforce their traffic management policy much more effectively. And basically, in the middle of the night when, the Amazon truck is going down the corridor and it's going 40 miles per hour to get to its shipping destination, every stop is, an economic failure, right? You just want that truck to be able to go straight through, assuming there's no cars. But at 2 a.m., there's no cars, yet the lights are still stopping them. You've been at a red light at like 3 a.m. with no one around.
There,
you run it. Who the fuck, No, or you don't. But if the traffic, if the intersection was adaptive to the environment, then you could, essentially never have to deal with the green light again at night. So there's all the, like when a pedestrian's walking into the street and the light's about to turn green from red, you as the city can now hold the red for just those few extra seconds to make sure that the cars don't start gunning. Fire trucks, like police cars, all these things that today, like, you know, are causing these safety hazards because they put on the sirens. Imagine if you could just change the entire road
Start
green.
writing algorithms that make it smarter so that
That's the next. Yeah, I mean that's the next phase. First, you give the humans the tools. They give you the data to, you know, then train the AI, and then the next thing you know, algorithms are running the world. So,
was that something we need to worry about?
You know, I think it depends. For certain, you know, certain things like surveillance, we've seen that there's, you know, inherent biases in the way that these systems work, and potentially they can favor certain races or genders or classes based on the data that's training the system. So we need to be very careful about how, you know, AI and surveillance get paired together. But I think, you know, for healthcare, like being able to get personalized healthcare from AI and not have to rely on like generic advice from the system, that's going to change, you know, a lot of people's lives for the better.
But if we go back to that previous point, I mean, that's an interesting point, because isn't it kind of like, so there's a lot of talk about racial profiling, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm assuming that's kind of like an example of what you're talking about. In Israel, you know, no one here cares about that because, like, we're kind of dealing with the issues for real, and so we racially profile because it's effective, and a lot of controversy around it. In the States, it, you know, would not fly if you picked someone out because he looked Arab.
Sure.
But if the data is doing that, like, maybe there's like, you know what I mean? Maybe it's like that's how maybe us meddling with it is actually doing the opposite. So now we're making it less secure. Let's say we have a security system that racially profiles. We're actually causing a detriment by saying, okay, no, you need to treat all races equal.
Yeah, I don't think that's. I mean, that potentially could cause, you know, false positives or false negatives if you try to meddle with the data. I think the problem is that if you don't use like equal data when you're training the AI, then the data will be much more accurate for, let's say, white people than black people. So it may mistake like a certain black person for, you know, someone else because the sophistication of the algorithm just was weaker because you had less data. And that's basically what I'm saying is a threat. Like if you train the algorithms and you have enough data on a certain population and not enough on another population, the algorithm might actually make the wrong judgment call when it should have made a different one. It's like facial
recognition, I know, is like actually harder for black people with computers because they've been trained mostly on white faces.
Exactly.
It's very difficult. All right, cool. So what happens to all the startups that fail? Like where do they go? Does all the money that's invested in a startup by VCs or by angel investors just kind of poof, disappears?
Yeah, I mean, have you heard of Cyprus?
Yeah.
We just send them there.
And then Victor Lieberman picks up the scraps.
Yeah. No. I mean, you know, obviously VC is a business of many failures and a few winners that hopefully make up for the failures. As a good VC, you're actually supposed to just ditch the losers as quickly as possible and focus all your resources on the winners. The problem is that VCs have reputations, and if you get a reputation for being, you know, extremely abrasive to founders that are having struggles, then as you know, build your career over the long run, and, you know, people reference check you as a VC, which, you know, good entrepreneurs will also call your portfolio up and say, you know, what were they like in the bad times? So if you act like a shitty person when the times are bad, then your chances of winning a competitive deal when founders are referencing you will go down. So I think there is an incentive in the system to help even the struggling companies to an extent. You know, obviously, like there's only so much you can do. Basically, you know, if a company is running out of money and you see that they might only need a few more months to really crack, you know, some business opportunity, then yeah, you'll potentially give them a little bit more runway.
Can a VC just pull out money? I mean, isn't there?
So I mean, at Lool we do it, our way. Each VC does it differently, but usually you reserve, anywhere from 25 to 75% of your funds to support your portfolio of investments. So, I might put in 1.5 up front, but I might have 1.5 on the back end, either for, the next round I want to participate, or a rainy day when something goes wrong. And so each VC works a little bit differently, but ideally you'll have a little bit of, money in the bank just to support the companies if they're struggling. Now, you might also say, well, look, I have a company that's doing amazing. I want to put it there because they have a much higher probability of, returning a high return on that capital. And if I put it in the company that's struggling and they don't figure it out in 2 or 3 months, then I just blew that cash, and that's not good. So it's always this, calculation of probabilities. I wish I could say it's a science. It's more like a combination. Yeah, it's like you need to feel out the entrepreneur and their capabilities, but it's not always so easy.
Not simple. So tell me about WeWork has been hitting the headlines a lot lately. I don't know the story. I just know that I've heard a lot about the CEO and him being a bit of like bit wild. But tell us the story of what's going on with WeWork and what are the issues there?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by saying I'm not an expert on WeWork. I never did diligence on the company.
Sure
I'm aware, but I'm not. I'm not like whatever CNBC talking about WeWork. So they started as a concept which had already been established called co-working. They weren't the first one to come up with it, but they were the first one to sort of like create an iconic brand around this idea of like people working in a shared office space. And you've been to WeWorks, you know what it's like. It's like you have the beer and you have like the colors and it's chic and it's urban and it's cool. And actually, I'm very grateful for WeWork because when I came to Israel in February 2015 with no friends, no apartment, all I had was a job. Thank God I had something. I was in a WeWork for the first year in Israel. And through that experience, I actually met friends, and one of my best friends I met in the WeWork. He was also working there. So I'm really grateful to WeWork for what they've brought to the world. I think the issue, ultimately is one of economics. Now, recently we've seen the issue is also one of governance and the CEO and his behavior and the way that he's sort of, I would say, manipulated the company's well-being in exchange for his well-being financially. And that's what a lot of, I think, the criticism has come to. But people are, really concerned about the economics of the business because basically they're, they have a lot of income from rent, but they're also taking on, tens of billions of dollars in liabilities, long-term leases to actually operate and run these spaces. So when you look at the business model, I think last year they did like 1.7 billion in revenue, but they lost like 1.9 billion of losses, which is a net difference of 3.6.
So they're
nowhere close to profitability. Now, Uber's not, Lyft is not. There are plenty of companies that have IPO'd before gaining profitability. And usually the story they tell is we're favoring growth over profitability, meaning that once we, become the monopoly because we're growing and we're, better than all of our competitors, then like Amazon, which was unprofitable public for, I don't know, a decade.
I think that's my phone.
Okay.
1 second.
No problem.
You know what it's for?
You tell me.
I gotta give my cat antibiotics.
Okay. Can you do that remotely or?
Not yet, but maybe that's a startup idea.
Okay, maybe.
Okay,
so the water bottle.
Yeah, so WeWork.
Right.
So a lot of companies are not profitable. Are you saying Amazon wasn't profitable?
Amazon wasn't profitable until like 2017.
Yeah.
Because all of their revenues just went right back into growth and extending their defensibility and their moat so that ultimately there was just no way any other retailer would be able to compete with Amazon. So WeWork and others have claimed the same, like because we're the dominant monopoly, that's going to keep growing like wildfire. Eventually, like at some point, all of our competition will die out and we'll capture this entire co-working market. I think the reality is that it doesn't work the way it worked with Amazon in real estate and in co-working, because the barriers to entry of starting up a co-working space are not so high. Like you need to have a little bit of startup capital, but where Amazon, it's like able to have these economies of scale, which allow it to do like the best prices in the world. WeWork is not doing the best prices in the world. They're actually trying to do like a premium price, right? So look, WeWork, I think the thesis there, if you believe in it, is that because they have so many freelancers and startups and corporates, that eventually they can aggregate a bunch of services, whether it's like, insurance or, banking or dry cleaning or whatever it is. Like they aggregate the services and they provide them to their community at a discount. And so the community is not just paying rent. They're now paying almost all of their operating costs as a business to WeWork as the vendor, as like their single vendor. If they can, prove that model, I think that might change the economics a little bit. But at the end of the day, at least the investors in the public markets are saying this is much more a real estate business than a technology business. And so the multiples of a technology business on revenues are much, much higher than on a real estate business.
Yeah.
Why? Because the business model is different. We can get into it, but it's.
But
it's
you also
technical.
have like you mentioned, there's the issue of governance, and you have this like, there's this new type of like celebrity CEO that's like sometimes kind of rubs investors and generally the public the wrong way. You have
Sorry for chewing.
you have like Elon Musk, and you have the CEO of WeWork,
Right.
Adam
Neumann.
So why do you think that, like, do you think that just happens as a consequence of like huge success, or is it something that was just kind of there from the start and missed by, investors?
I think the irony is that investors are attracted to this personality, sort of this like very charismatic, visionary, like incredible storyteller. Like, Adam's, I think in his filing for public, he wants to elevate the world's spiritual consciousness. Like that's what WeWork is about. The We company is about elevating our consciousness. I mean, he actually believes this. I think he, truly believes that this
company. So? I heard a quote that he said if he was to be president of anything, it'd be president of the world. I don't know. It sounds kind of pretentious.
He thinks he's God for sure. Like he thinks he's maybe on the level of Jesus, but in the modern era. So yeah, I mean, maybe he has certain psychological, tendencies towards power and wealth and ego, and I don't know him, so I don't, personally, I can't really speak to his psychology, but he's definitely, especially in Israel, like if we see someone who really has the charisma and the confidence and they just like can tell the story of how they're going to bring it to the world, investors like,
they eat it up.
They eat it because they obviously, telling stories is like one of the most fundamental things to our species. And so finding someone who can really tell a good story in English in Israel is harder than, finding it in the States. And he just also like has he's like handsome and good looking and has that vibe of like, I'm going to be successful. And I think that's what happened with SoftBank too. Like this guy, whatever his name is, the Japanese investor who gave him so much money, I think was just like charmed at the end of the day by Adam's voice and, the way he interacted and the fun they had together. And he never really dug in deeply enough to the business, or his team did and he neglected it. Who really knows? So.
Because that's interesting, because like you mentioned before, there's all this market research and looking into the business model and all. And when you're saying that, I was like, okay, so how much power can, a personality have? But you're saying that that can influence a lot. Maybe more with angel investors than with a VC. Maybe more when you're kind of tackling one guy with a lot of money.
It could be. I mean, ultimately, the team trumps all. I think if you have a great market, great technology, great product, but the CEO can't tell the story and can't give you this sense of like, this guy's going to be able to sell, right? Because you're not just selling to, your investors, you're selling to your employees, your customers, your future investors, your partners, the media, like all the time you're selling the vision, the story, the mission, why this company needs to be successful. And based on how that story resonates with all of these different stakeholders, ultimately is going to determine a lot of your success or failure. So that's, I think, definitely something we focus on. Yeah.
Cool. Listen, I think that was really enlightening for a lot of guests. I don't think anybody kind of knows the whole kind of startup. Like, we all hear Startup Nation, but we don't really kind of understand what's going on here, the relationship between VCs and startups and all the drama behind it. But I guess it's probably a good idea to go and read about it and check out Startup Nation. I've never read it. It's recommended, or is it just kind of like Israel propaganda?
Yeah, so it's funny you say that. So basically, there's a music video coming out in a couple weeks.
Okay.
And this is my chance to plug.
Is this the second one?
This is actually the third one. So the first one was in college. I was studying for a marketing exam, and I didn't really feel like studying, so I wrote a rap about the test. Then I went into the class the next day, and I asked my teacher if I could perform it for the class. Yeah. Which I'm sure she never heard before, and she's never heard after, a student asking to rap about her exam. And I did it, and it was fun, and she liked it. And she said, look, instead of your final exam, why don't you do a rap about the Fox School of Business, where I went to school, and that will be your final. You'll do a rap video. You get some classmates together. That'll be like your project. I said, you know what? That sounds like fun. So I wrote a rap about the Fox School of Business. I had my friend in the class film it and edit it. And she cried. It really moved her. And I got an A. Mary Conran. That was 10 years ago. And then I went to the partners at Lool a few months back, and I said, look, here's this video I created in college. I don't know why, but I suddenly feel like this urge to create another one. And I think it'd be fun to create one that, excuse me, engages with entrepreneurs, because as I see it as a venture investor, there's this huge knowledge gap between what entrepreneurs are thinking and what VCs are thinking. And then when entrepreneurs go and pitch and get into a conversation with VCs, a lot of times they just haven't really thought through all of the aspects that VCs are really trying to understand. So the Lool partners gave me the green light. They said, go shoot it. My good friend Julian was kind enough to help me with the project. And I created this video, and it got good feedback in the local ecosystem. But, that's sort of the beginning. And then I said, well, why don't I create something that's a little bit more close to my heart, something a little bit more near and dear. And so I decided to write a rap about Israel. And basically,
cherry tomatoes and all that.
That's we left that one out. But yeah, I mean, you live here, I live here. We're both from the States originally. And we know that the narrative, that Israel gets portrayed as in the media is often, very distorting to what the reality on the ground is. And even though Startup Nation is a great book, let's be honest, why haven't you read it? Why haven't, most of people our age or younger read it, and the Snapchat generation definitely hasn't read it? It's because that's not how they're consuming information anymore. It's these short form videos, it's these snaps and stories and little, bite-sized clips online. And so I thought, what if I could turn the book into a bite-sized clip online? Wouldn't that be good for Israel and getting its story, at least both sides of the story out? Look, everyone should be held accountable for their actions. Every country should be held accountable for their actions. I really believe in taking responsibility. But we're very quick to criticize, and we're very reluctant to praise. And it's frustrating to live in Israel
specifically,
in general, but also in Israel. I think people are very quick to criticize, very reluctant to praise. But even your relationships, think about how many more times you criticize than you give praise. It's a tragedy. And I think we need to be a little bit more conscious of the praise that we can give to others, as well as to the environments in which we live. So for me, it's an amazing opportunity to praise Israel. But then I went to Startup Nation Central, and I don't know if you know them. They're a nonprofit that helps to bridge between corporate innovation abroad and Israeli technology here. And I said,
Is it founded by the same people that wrote the book?
It is.
Oh, okay.
Sponsored by family of the people who wrote the book, I believe. Paul Singer, not Saul Singer. I think they're related, but I'm not 100% sure. It's just a typo now. And so I asked them if they would, sponsor this production, and they said yeah. So I feel very humbled to be, being a creator in this video and being a rapper, and that will come out, and hopefully, if that doesn't inspire you to read the book, at least we'll give you some, bite-sized piece of content.
Maybe it'll be the beginning of Max Marine's rap career.
Or the continuation.
Well, what blows up the career.
So I hope so. I have 2 more raps. One is about cleaning the cigarette butts because it's a huge issue, especially in Israel. 4.5 trillion butts are flicked annually, like in the streets.
In Israel?
No,
Or,
in the world.
In the world.
But that's 10 times more butts than stars in the Milky Way. Just think about that. Once a year. The stars stay pretty constant, but the butts keep getting flicked. And they're extremely toxic. They're worse than plastic. They're polluting our ecosystems, and marine life is getting just decimated.
So you could do a rap song, or
there's a rap song about cleaning the butts.
Okay,
that'll come out at some point. And then over the weekend during Rosh Hashanah, I wrote a new rap about global warming. So that's also a topic I'm excited to share my own perspective on. So
what's the Tova, you want to save it for the release of the video?
The Startup Nation one? Or
no, the climate change one.
So, I can give you like I can tell you the chorus, just to give you a sense of what's coming, okay? So, all the people you love and all the food that you eat are gifts from planet Earth, the ground beneath your feet. Let's honor Mother Nature, admit there is no savior. To stop catastrophe, we must change our behavior. I think that's like the essence of it. There's all these gifts that we take for granted from planet Earth. It comes right beneath our feet. All the food, all the people, it's a gift. And then let's honor Mother Nature by saying, look, we're creating all this destruction and catastrophe with our actions. Ultimately, people think it's like complicated and complex. No, it's just temperature. That's all that's happening. The temperature is rising much faster than it ever has before. And when that melts glaciers, then you have sea levels rising that put cities underground.
Starting a whole nother
I'm not going to get
episode.
into it. I'm just saying that people I don't think have a simple explanation of what's happening, or a simple explanation of how to take actions to change this impending doom. So that's another reason I like to write, and I think rap is an interesting format to communicate a lot of information sort of quickly. So.
Okay,
anyway.
Cool. So, guys, look out for the third Max Marine rap video and rap song. And what are you also on social media, or do you write blogs or something like that?
I have a
you?
Medium that's Max Marine or Maximilian Marine. I'm working on my personal brand now because it might matter sooner rather than later. Honestly, you can follow me at Twitter at Big Max Marine, but there's no followers and there's no content, so it might be a little premature. But if you want to keep track of me, I'm curious to get your perspective, like for a rap sort of identity or whatever, like what platform is.
I think I'm the last one, a guy named Eitan Weinstein, to give you rap advice. But
just like, I guess, musical creation. Like, there's Instagram, there's YouTube, there's Facebook.
I think you got to be like, everybody always says get on all the channels, but like we're definitely not there. We just started with our Instagram a little while ago, and it's been a struggle. It's hard, man.
To build.
Like an independent creator to like get your stuff on all this different,
Exactly.
It's tough, but I wish you luck.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, man, for joining us.
For sure.
Before we go, that we have a collaboration with the Jewish Journal. You know the Jewish Journal?
Is that
Jewish
from
Journal.
LA?
Yeah, the Jewish Journal of LA. So check them out, guys. JewishJournal.com. There's great podcasts, great columns. There's Shmuel Rosner's podcast, David Suissa's, a lot of good podcasts and a lot of good content. So check them out, JewishJournal.com. And we got the Chosen One.
I can't stop touching it.
Like,
the energy is just attracting me.
It's emanating.
It is.
So, guys, check them out, thechosenonegame.com. Use our promo code 2, the number 2, NJB. You can also just click the link in the podcast description and you get a discount. It's a hilarious game. You got question and answer cards. You match them up. It's really funny stuff. Bit grotesque sometimes. So maybe it's like rated PG 16. 16, I'd say. I don't know. They have an 17 plus.
Wow,
So maybe I'm a little bit more
13
liberal.
is the new 17.
Yeah.
17 is the new 13.
Yeah. So check them out. chosenonegame.com. 2NJB is a promo code. And lastly, we do this on our free time, guys. So you can go to 2njb.com/donate and help us out if you want to. Thank you so much, man. Really, it was really enlightening, really interesting. I didn't think you'd be this knowledgeable about all this stuff. I thought I'd like ask you questions, be like, I don't know, man. But you have all this information. It was really interesting. Thank you.
For sure. My pleasure.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.